Session, as you know, is very important because in this session we will announce a number of awards for this conference, and also, of course, before we disperse, dash off at the airport or go back to the hotel, the general chair of the conference, Javier, will also make a few concluding remarks. Last night at the banquet, we already announced the very first recipient of the very first YBIA, that is the Young Biometric Investigator Award, which, as you know, goes to Dr. Aaron Ross. So as part of the program, I know, where's Aaron? So as a return for the check and all the nice certificates, so he will be here to present a talk on title is here, Biometrics in Search of Identity. And this is a great opportunity to hear some of the wonderful work that Aaron has done over the past many years. So without further ado, Aaron, please.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. If not, you're very lucky. So the talk is titled Biometrics in Search of Identity. The reason why this particular title was chosen, well, biometrics and identity have some commonality. There is some relation between the two. Secondly, biometrics is also trying to find its identity in the grand scheme of things in society, in terms of establishing itself with regards to applications and so forth. So there is a play in words here, and hopefully as we go through this specific talk, we will get to discuss more aspects of what we're seeing right now. Again, I want to thank all of you for being here in the last session to listen to what I thought was a 30-minute talk, and Professor Tan told me 25 minutes. So let's hope that works out. I have many people to thank this evening before we proceed. One is my PhD advisor, Professor Anil K. Jain, who taught me the basics of research and gave me the opportunity to engage in scientific research, and obviously his advice and counsel has helped me over the past several years. I'd like to thank my family. They're not here, but I'd like to thank them. And the students and postdocs in the iProbe lab, our lab, who have done exceptional work over the past several years. The nominator and endorsers for the YBIA award, who spent their time in terms of nominating and then endorsing this. My collaborators at West Virginia University and Michigan State University, and of course, the biometrics community, which includes everyone here, for your support and friendship, because every time we come back to one of these conferences, we have the opportunity to make new friends and also to reacquaint ourselves with old friends, and that's a good opportunity as well. And finally, the International Association for Patent Recognition, and more specifically, the TC4 Committee on Biometrics for establishing this award, thanks to the events at ICB 2012. So the research work that I'm describing this afternoon is originating from this lab, the Integrated Patent Recognition and Biometrics Lab. We currently have 6 PhD students and 3 postdocs, and we have the opportunity to collaborate with several of you and several other biometric research groups, and we are grateful for that opportunity. And also, we'd like to thank our funding agencies who have supported many of the projects, and certainly their contribution to many of our lab's efforts cannot be undermined, and so I'm very grateful to these program managers. All right, just to get started, I'm going to make this a light talk, not too many technical details, but just to perhaps have some kind of informal discussion here. So what are my thoughts about identity? And these are some questions that has that I've been thinking of, both certainly from a scientific standpoint, but also from a philosophical standpoint, because research does engage us in more than one way, and certainly these are some thoughts that I had, and certainly you would have a different set of thoughts when we think about identity. For example, are we really unique? If so, what makes us unique? How are we different from others? And can we describe this concept of uniqueness? I think these are some thoughts about identity. Although we talk about identity in many of our discussions, obviously we haven't really gotten a grasp of what identity is. It is still an abstract entity. It has a social component, a cultural component, a philosophical component, a personal component, and certainly that's not what we're dealing with in these conferences. So, but however, we talk about projections of identity, not the identity itself, but projections of identity. What do I mean by that? Well, a person's identity can be manifested, as it were, through these various means. For example, it could be your email address and the email correspondences that you might undertake. It could be your Twitter account or your Facebook account. It could be your cell phone and the activities that you engage with through your cell phone. It could be just a key, because just because you have a key, I know that this person has access to this room and I'm able to understand something more. It could be your biometric passport. It could be Second Life for those of you who have an account in a virtual world. You do not like the real world, so you spend some time in the virtual world. Or it could be a trait like a palm print. The point is, all these are merely projections of a person's identity, and eventually would help us in some sense to decipher what we need about this person in order to make a decision that has some societal value or some consequence. And so biometrics is not identity itself, but is a projection of a person's identity, and therefore is still an external entity. But identity has its own challenges. I mean, when we talk about identity in, say, a very challenging environment, where you have individuals walking at a distance, and where you may not have the traditional biometric traits, so one has to consider what contributes to identity in this aspect, in this context. And these are important questions to answer as well. Obviously, identity does not change just because I moved from point A to point B in terms of the content. But then when you start looking at it from the empirical standpoint, you cannot use the same tokens and projections of identity that you used in point A, because they're no longer reliable or no longer accessible, and therefore you'll have to now look into other biometric traits as well. So some of our current research activities are summarized here. We have some work going on in multi-biometrics, fingerprints, ocular biometrics, face, gait recognition and human metrology in a nighttime environment, and also some theoretical treatments like modeling errors of a re-identification system, a surveillance system, a deduplication system, etc. But to keep this short, I'd just like to focus on a few aspects very quickly and at a very high level. One, biometrics in non-ideal and unconstrained environments. I think, as Professor Anil Jain pointed out in his keynote talk, some of the problems in biometrics are almost solved, assuming that you have high-quality data, reliable data. But when one starts moving into non-ideal and unconstrained environments, then all the algorithms that have been previously developed will have to be modified, and new ideas have to be infused in order to solve these problems. Secondly, imparting privacy to biometric images. Because biometric images are projections of a person's identity and therefore have a specific role to play in the context of a certain application, it is necessary to ensure that it's not violated or abused and used beyond what it was intended for. And so you have this notion of imparting privacy to biometric images. Thirdly, if one were to look for biometric data in a large database, then one needs methods for indexing biometric data. How do you retrieve an identity rapidly? because you might have collected a very good biometric database in the context of a social or a criminal application or a law enforcement application. But the question is, can you search through this database rapidly and meaningfully so that you can make a decision? Fourthly, assessing and addressing biometric vulnerabilities. One has to obviously assume that biometric systems have their vulnerabilities. They can be spoofed, there are obfuscation attacks, etc. Now, how does one both gauge this, but also develop countermeasures to biometric vulnerabilities? And I'm not suggesting that this is the holistic biometric perspective. It is not. It is merely my perspective. There are so many other research arenas in biometrics, which is why we have these conferences where we can be exposed to ideas, in many cases, some which might contradict our own perspective of the field. So I'd like to talk a bit about non-ideality, and the iris texture fascinates me. I mean, so if you look into a person's eye and the lighting is right, you see a rich texture. I mean, there's so much detail in the iris, so much anatomical details in the iris. And so if you're performing iris recognition, and as has been demonstrated in public testing, one obtains a very good performance, assuming that the data is of high quality. And that's because of the richness of the texture and the distinctiveness of the texture that one sees on the stroma of the iris, which is the anterior portion of the iris. But in many cases, the reality of the situation is, in operational environment such as iris on the move kind of systems, the performance of the system is impacted by the quality of the input data. Illumination, deviated gaze, occlusion, motion blur, deformation, etc. So now all those algorithms that have been formally developed to perform iris recognition, well, in principle they hold, but now you're dealing with data that has been substantially modulated because of the sensing environment, because of human factors, and because of sensor changes, etc. And so one of the things that we've been focusing on is developing robust iris segmentation algorithms. So for example, we have one algorithm that is based on active contours, which geodesic active contours more specifically. And here what we see is the ability to extract the iris or the limbus, in this particular case the pupillary boundary, but more precisely the limbic boundary, in a reliable fashion, even when the quality of the iris image may not be very good. And in this particular example that you see here, the iris boundary pertaining to the limbus region is being extracted using the principle of geodesic active contours. The other aspect related to this is, now that the iris is degraded in quality because of the circumstances under which it was collected, it is possible to look at the regions surrounding the iris, not in the anatomical sense, but in the image sense, because you see the sclera, the eyelids, the eyelashes, the eyebrows, the periocular skin texture, etc. So one of the other aspects that we've been recently investigating is the notion of encoding this periocular information, which is available in the image, but which has to be very carefully characterized and matched. The reason we state this is because in this particular example, we observe that just using the global information contained in the periocular region, the region surrounding the ocular region, is just using that is not sufficient, because you have geometric distortions. In some cases, the global information might look the same across subjects. And so then from global information, one needs to look at local information, and then also take into account the local or global geometric distortions. In other words, you have an intricate play between photometric variations and geometric variations, and consequently, a single encoding scheme may not be able to capture these diversity of information due to the sensing context. So one of the things we've been exploring is using multiple representation schemes to accurately and robustly encode periocular information. And in one of the challenging databases called Fox dataset, we were able to use this principle, namely that one encoding scheme is not sufficient, that we need to have multiple schemes. So if you look at this table, on the extreme left, you have 4 different entities listed: iris, and you can look at the equilateral rate, which is rather large, or you can then encode the periocular region, where you have global, local, and deformation. These are entries on the left column. And then right below that, in the last row, you have the fusion scheme. The point being that this fusion scheme, integrating the evidence presented by multiple encoding schemes, if done appropriately, can help in further improving the performance of the biometric system. So one of the themes over the past several years in our research group and also in other collaborations is this concept of information fusion. That when you have multiple pieces of degraded data, you can still reliably develop a fusion scheme that can exploit the virtues and weaknesses of the individual encoding schemes, thereby resulting in improved matching accuracy. So that's a fascinating concept, that you have many weak evidences, but when combined appropriately, you get a very strong matcher, which of course has been in the literature for a long, long time. So there are other benefits of using this surrounding region, because when one talks about iris and one conducts research in iris recognition, it's always good to understand the context in which it is being done. One is the use of periocular provides a good trade-off between using the entire face region and using only the iris. This seems to be kind of contradictory, because one could say, well, if you have the entire face, why don't you use the face image? And if you have only the iris, just use the iris image, because it has been demonstrated to be rather unique, and a lot of good performance measures have been observed. Well, the point is that in some applications, it's a question of trade-off. You may not have a good quality iris, or you may have a good quality, or you may have a poor quality face. And so one needs to assess the trade-off between using the entire face region and using only the iris, and this is where the periocular biometrics can play a role. Again, periocular, which is kind of extraocular, referring to the region in the ocular space of the human face. Also, the use of periocular biometrics becomes more pronounced when only partial face image is available. When the entire face image is not available, then this becomes of tremendous importance. And we have demonstrated in the literature that in some scenarios, even when the full face is available, and even when the iris can be seen in color images, for example, you can't use the iris reliably because you're operating in the color spectrum, and sometimes when the face is occluded, you can't use the entire face for reliable matching. And so focusing on the periocular and trying to extract features, encoding those features, would help in improving the performance, as we have demonstrated in some of our papers. The other work is looking at iris in multiple spectral bands. Typically, the iris is sensed in between 750 to 900 nanometers because the melanin content decreases. So what you see is not impacted by the color of the iris or the pigmentation of the iris. It is predominantly a reflection of the texture of the iris. But also, one thing that we've been looking at is looking at iris recognition in the shortwave infrared spectrum. You go beyond 900 nanometers. Why do we do this? Why is this required? Because in some settings, in some scenarios, in some tactical scenarios, this wavelength is used to obtain other information from subjects. And so now the question is, if the iris is obtained in such a non-ideal tactical scenario, can you use this iris image for matching? And as you can see in these images, I'm not sure if it is clear, but the iris structure looks different, or rather the iris texture looks different just because the wavelength has changed. For example, in 1350 nanometers, the limbus boundary and the activity in the limbus region is more pronounced just because of the interaction between the biology of the iris and the wavelength that is used to impinge the iris. So we have done some analysis of this and tried to understand, can you do cross-spectral matching? If you have obtained an iris image in 950 nanometers, can you match this iris image with a legacy iris database that has been obtained using 800 nanometers or 750 nanometers? So this is an interesting area of study because the iris has not changed. What has changed is the sensor that is used to observe the iris, and consequently, the details that are being exposed have changed. And in spite of this, can you do cross-spectral matching is an interesting question. We've also looked at some other pieces of information in the vicinity of the iris. This is in the context of conducting research where you would like to do iris recognition in the visible spectrum. Like I said earlier, iris recognition is done in the near-infrared spectrum because of the availability of texture that is lost to a certain extent and dominated by color in the visible spectrum. But if you want to do iris in the visible spectrum, due to legacy reasons, because of the availability of data sets, et cetera, what we have observed is potentially using the vasculature pattern that is evident in the sclera of the eye. Now, the sclera is avasculature, but there are two specific layers called the episclera and conjunctiva, where you have these vasculature patterns being displayed and which can be seen through the sclera. And now the question is, can this be used? And we have done some research work demonstrating that it's possible to utilize this as some kind of a soft biometric trait in addition to other features to improve the performance of a biometric system. So we talked a little bit about vulnerabilities and non-idealities. We're still in the topic of non-idealities. One thing is the ability to recognize individuals who have undergone plastic surgery predominantly for cosmetic or medical reasons. So these are not individuals who are trying to obfuscate their identity. It's just a natural process through which they've gone through. It's not a biological change, of course. It could be a cosmetic or a medically induced change. Now the question is, can you match these images before and after the surgery? Here are some sample images from the IIITD database that was collected by Dr. Mayank Vatsa and Dr. Richa Singh. And one of the things that we did in our lab was to see how we could exploit the ocular region information in assessing the identity when a face has undergone plastic surgery. And we used commercial face matchers, PitPat, and then we used for ocular, we used different kinds of representation schemes. And what we observed is when we used both the face and ocular region simultaneously, we were able to observe an improvement in performance in terms of matching images that have been subjected to plastic surgery, or faces rather, that have been subjected to plastic surgery. And of course, this is an interesting area of research. As people find different ways of changing their face, it's necessary to understand the effect on face recognition, but also develop algorithms that are robust to these changes. And that's the theme in terms of handling these problems. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about privacy of the biometric data. In some cases, the biometric data of an individual is stored in a central database, and we all know what the risks are when they are stored in a central biometric database. We know about the difficulty in reissuing biometric data. Also, cross-database matching. If I have database of face images, can I match it with another database, thereby inferring the identity of an individual? So these are some concerns that people have expressed in terms of biometric data storage. So one thing that we have developed and that we are still working on is the storage aspect. What do you store in a database? Well, of course, you can always encrypt. That's always a good solution. But in some cases, you would want the administrator to not infer the identity, but perhaps you can infer other aspects of the face. So what do I mean by that? Here you have a face image, and assuming that you're giving your face image to agency 1, and for some reason you don't trust agency 1, and so now you have a third-party negotiator, agency 2, and agency 2 is part of this whole deal, where your face image is now split into two parts, in agency 1 and agency 2. And the way we do this is through a scheme called visual cryptography, which was originally developed by Binary Images by Naur and Shamir, 1994 Eurocrypt paper, where given an image, you can split it into many binary images, which look like random images, but when you put them together, the original image is revealed. So that's the concept here. So for example, if it's a fingerprint, you could divide it into two parts. It looks exactly like this, and when you do the OR operator, this particular image comes out. So this is exactly what was done. The image was taken, and what you saw here was just the two sheets, and these two sheets are brought together, and you get the original image. Now, obviously, it's not exactly the original image, as you would have guessed, because this is a binary operation. And so the scheme has been extended. And people have what's called as GE-VCS. VCS for visual cryptography scheme that we discussed. GE is for grayscale extended, to work on images that are of the multiple gray levels. So how have we used this particular thing? Now, agency 1 would see this image. Does anyone know who this person is? Yeah, Denzel Washington. And agency 2 will see this image in their database. And this is Will Smith, okay? But if you look carefully, these two images have been modified a little. At the pixel level, they have been modified a little. Because if I do an XOR operator, all right, if I do an XOR operator, you will get this image, all right? Do you know who this person is? No. Okay, so Antitza knows that because this is one of our lab students. It's Asim Othman, right? And so Asim Othman is the one whose image is hidden in this particular case. So the point being, the two agencies will only see someone else's picture, and they can maybe glean other pieces of data. For example, the gender, the expression, etc. But they can't glean the identity. And so we have done some experiments empirically demonstrating the possibility of using this to retain some characteristics of the image and then not the identity. We have done something similarly for fingerprints, trying to produce a new mixed fingerprint image. For example, again, if you have a joint bank account with another individual, image 1 and image 2, the two people's fingerprint is mixed, you create what is called as a mixed fingerprint. So what is stored in the database is a mixed fingerprint which cannot be matched with the original fingerprint. It can only be matched with another mixed fingerprint pertaining to the same two identities. In other words, you have obscured the identity of the original fingerprint by mixing it with another fingerprint, thereby giving some aspect of cancelability. So partly this research goes into the concept of generating joint multiple identities, where we would like to see in the future if biometric templates will retain the aspects of multiple identities, but not by simple concatenation, but by mixing them, either at the image level or at the feature level, creating a new identity itself. And so that's another aspect of our research. We are almost done here. The other thing that we're working on is searching for an identity. How do you quickly retrieve the correct identity from a large database? We developed an indexing scheme, a coding scheme to do this, and it can be applied for any kind of modality. And the interesting thing is, in a database of 1,000 images, at a hit rate of 98.5%, we demonstrated that we can only search 3.8% of the database. We don't have to search every image in the database. We can quickly retrieve by narrowing our search to only 3.8% of the database. Finally, I'd like to talk a little bit, as we close this, on the impact of cosmetics on face recognition. This comes under the biometrics vulnerability, or in general, alteration of a biometric trait. What happens when you alter a biometric trait? And from a human visual perspective, there are many ways in which the face can be changed. And what we demonstrated was that, well, face matches are impacted by cosmetics, but as was shown in one of the presentations in this conference, we could even detect the presence of makeup on face images and use that to improve the performance of face recognition systems. In other words, to mitigate the effect of makeup on face recognition. Professor Tan, I have 3 more slides and I'm going to close here. The 3 slides are some of the questions that our lab is currently dealing with in the broad scheme of things. So it's not 1 year or a 1.5 year project. This is more 5 to 6 or 7 years projects. So 3 questions, 3 slides, and these are the questions. The first one, questions related to biometric science. How can the biometric trait of an individual be effectively modeled using biologically tenable models? Not just mathematical models, but mathematical models that are biologically tenable, not just empirically observable. Secondly, how can the uniqueness of a biometric trait be deduced based on such models? Can we even define the notion of uniqueness? Thirdly, What is the impact of age and disease on the stability and permanence of biometric characteristics? Again, not from an empirical observation where we just collect data, but have a more systematic understanding of the impact of these covariates on biometrics, because these are obvious covariates, because all of us are subject to age and all of us are subject to diseases. The second set of questions has to do with engineering. One, what type of signal enhancement and matching models are necessary to work on severely degraded biometric data? We can always say that we want good biometric data, but what happens if we get poor quality data? Do we throw them out, or can we have methods to recover and use them? Secondly, how do we accord privacy to users of the system? Thirdly, how can we predict the matching performance of large-scale biometric systems based on statistical and mathematical models? Prediction is important because we always work with data, but how do we use the data to predict something else that is going to be deployed in a very different area? Fourthly, how can large biometric databases be efficiently searched? And there is a rationale for connecting these questions, but that is something that we may not have time, and we do not have time to discuss here. Finally, some kind of philosophical musings. One, what constitutes the identity of an individual? Secondly, what are the societal implications of machines identifying humans? There's human versus human identification, but what are the societal implications of machines identifying humans? And thirdly, what are the moral and ethical implications of a biometric system misidentifying an individual in a high-risk environment such as a combat zone? What happens when a system, biometric system built by a company, misidentifies a user and therefore the user is shot down? Who takes the blame? But more importantly, what are the moral and ethical implications of the algorithms that you and I and others are building? Because this has a definitive impact on how society conducts its different transactions. Thank you for your time. I'll stop there. This is a gender recognition algorithm that my student developed, so I'll leave it there. And again, thanks for your time and appreciate your patience. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Arun, for this very well presented piece of work. And your presentation has clearly told us, not only how much you can done and achieve even at the early stage of your career, but also how much more remains to be tackled and to be done. And I'm sure we can have a couple of questions from the floor, especially from the younger ones.
Everyone looks young, Professor Tan.
Actually, if you look back at your career for the past many years, what you would say to the younger researchers in this room?
Yeah. Well, I think, everyone has their distinct approach to life, their distinct perspective to how research has to be done. And again, I'm not qualified to give anyone any advice, so please don't mistake me as thinking I'm trying to give any advice. I'm just trying to advise myself. So I would tell myself that I would need to identify problems that have definitive societal impact. I'm not dismissing theoretical considerations. I love theoretical considerations, and if you look at some of our early papers and even recent papers, there are a lot of theoretical considerations. But also, there is the societal impact. And as biometric researchers, we are very fortunate to be working in a field that has that impact very directly: national security, laptop control, security access, etc., or just to have a conversation over Skype. So I think identifying those problems is the most challenging thing. If one is able to identify a set of problems, then your career, at least for the next 5-10 years, is all set, and because you'll be working on some problems with direct effect on society.
Yes, please.
Just had a quick question. What would you answer? Thank you. So, what would you answer to people that say that biometrics is just an engineering problem?
I think it's a good question. So, is biometrics an engineering problem? Certainly it is. There are aspects of engineering that are quite evident and quite on the surface. However, that engineering has to be sustained by science. And if you were to ask my personal opinion, that's where my biggest concern is. Just because I can match 2 fingerprint images doesn't mean that fingerprints are unique. What is the more scientific basis for making that assessment. Because if the fundamentals of the field are not established, either through logical or mathematical or biologically tenable models, then all we are doing is empirical evaluation. When some of these covariates change, the system can fall apart. So in response to your question, I would say that yes, there is an engineering aspect of it, but we need researchers also working on the fundamental aspects of the technology. Because once the fundamental aspects are strengthened, then one could move forward more confidently in building engineering systems. That does not mean we should stop building systems. We should build systems, but at the same time, we should be cognizant of the fundamentals of the technology and strengthening it.
Well, you know, the senior
Of course, my identity has changed now. So as Professor Tan pointed out, there is the Best Biometric Student Paper Award, BBSPA, that is awarded in odd years at ICB and even years at ICPR. So the process is the program chairs select the top 5 papers, which have the first author as a student, and they send it to the selection committee. The chair of the committee this year was Professor Massimo Distorelli, and there were 6 other members in the committee from Europe, Asia, and the United States. There were 5 of them from academia, 2 from the industry as required by the rules of this specific award. So out of these 5 awards, 5 papers rather, it was down selected to 3 papers because 2 of the papers were co-authored by members of the BBSPA. And so to avoid any conflict of interest, although these papers were rated well by the program committee, they were not up for consideration. And the remaining 3 papers were rated by the committee individually based on novelty, impact, the reviewer comments, their own perception of the paper, etc. So I'm very happy to announce the winner, and the prize itself will be given by Professor Javier Ortega, and I'm asking him to come up here before we make the announcement. Okay. So the Best Biometrics Student Paper Award is the paper titled Generating Face Images Under Multiple Illuminations based on a single front-lighted sample without 3D models, and it is co-authored by Xingjia, Qi Fang, Di Wen, and Xiaoqing Ding. So.
Can you look at the camera? Congratulations.
Right, thank you.
So the third award for this conference is called the Tabula Rasa Spoofing Challenge Award. And for this award, I would invite Sebastian Master to introduce the award.
Okay, I just need to switch on this. I have a couple of slides. Okay, very good. So, good afternoon. Thanks for staying here. So, as you might have seen over the last few days, 2 days actually, we had a couple of demonstrations running in the patio, and this was sponsored and organized by a European project called Tabula Rasa, which is working on spoofing, and for which we have organized here in ICB a kind of challenge with an award. So I'd just like to mention all the partners of this project, which is funded by the European Commission in Europe. And here you have all the partners, mainly from Europe, except that we have also a Chinese partner, which is quite unique and new project. So thanks to Kazia and Stan for being part of it. So this challenge basically consisted of having a couple of demonstrators for face recognition, so both visual spectra and near infrared, and the mixture of the two. having also a demonstration system for fingerprint and another one for voice recognition, so speaker recognition. And those systems were basically equipped of a matcher on which people were pre-enrolled, so in verification mode, so anybody can try to get authenticated as somebody else. So those systems were also equipped with liveness detection or a countermeasure to detect a fake, a spoof, if any. And this was optionally, it could be disabled, so we can basically explain people, well, here is what happens if you present a spoof, you can bypass the matcher, and otherwise, if we switch on the countermeasure, then you may or may not be, we may or may not detect the fake. So this is about the setup. So here are a couple of examples that we had. So we had fake fingerprints. We had also replayed audio in front of a microphone. We have print attacks with a piece of paper, but also more elaborated and I must say more expensive masks also that people can wear. And we have a couple of these masks and attacks that people could play with. So the goal was to basically to have a lot of participations just to show up and basically have people to play with it. We didn't expect at the beginning anything. We have no objectives in terms of participation or anything like this, but in any way we tried to set up a kind of challenge for anybody that would like to take an active participation and try to build their own spoof, basically. Come with their own fake or on-site develop their own attacks. So we had a lot of participants and what we call official participants, many visitors. So overall, participants are people that tried really to come with their own spoofs, okay? Not just people that were just passing by for trying. We had in total 9 participants, active participants, 9 in face verification and 3 in fingerprint verification. And we have many visitors, and so we have Anil that passed by and tried the masks of Nestle to face recognition. We have Stan also that tried to fake me, and other people that try basically to use to use print attacks. Then we have the contestants, so-called, so the people that really came prepared or either in advance with their own fakes. So we have those two guys that came prepared with their own fakes for which we have released fingerprints in advance. So it was really great, so thanks to them. I don't know if they are in the room today. And they managed actually to spoof the verification system, okay, which is provided with this fingerprint scanner. It's an optical scanner here. But the liveness detection, which was developed here by a Tabula Rasa partner, was effective, and the spoof was rejected. So liveness detection detected it was a fake. Then we have the contestants, so people that, so it was Titsa in this case, that identify a particular person that was enrolled into the model already, into the system already, and she thought that maybe by using some kind of makeup, well, she knew about makeup already, so then maybe that she could match that guy. So actually she tried, she could basically make up as this guy, which is Manuel, a part of our staff here, and she managed to be recognized as Manuel. And because the countermeasures are here, basically trying to find any proof of liveness, the thing is that the face is really alive, so the countermeasures were not effective. So she bypassed already also the countermeasures. Then we have more people trying to come with other fakes, already with their own fakes. So Stephanie is traveling apparently with some fakes around. And we have also people, those things that we haven't expected. So we have Luc. I don't know if Luc is here. So, Luc spent probably a couple of hours doing different kinds of drawings of people already enrolled into the system, and to try to bypass. And he was quite close, I must say. So congratulations to Luc, because he did a huge effort coming again and again to try to make good spoofs. So finally, among all the active participants to decide on who should deserve the award, we looked at the spoofing performance. Basically, does the attacker was able to be recognized as the target ID? Was he able to bypass the countermeasure as well? We also tried to take into account the effort that the person took, the creativity and the novelty, because if it was attacks that we have basically thought of before, it was maybe less interesting. And then the spoof, I'm glad to announce, I'm happy to announce that the Tabula Rasa Spoofing Award will go to Antizza.
Congratulations to Oscar Sebastian also to present the award.
Thank you very much. So you have wonderful award, and you have also the promise, as promised, nice tablets.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
The iPad is a real one, right? It's not a fake one.
Yeah, it's not a fake.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You know, the success of a conference like this one obviously depends on many things, but the review process is very important, actually critical, to ensure the quality of the conference. So to honor the efforts of the reviews, this year we have set up Best Reviews and Young Reviews Awards. And for this award, I will invite Raymond Villegas to introduce and present the award. Raymond.
So, the awards have been installed to award the reviewers, of course, but also to give them a challenge for future reviews. And we've been looking at 4 categories. The first one is the detail of the review. How well have they read and commented on the paper? Timeliness, were the reviews submitted in time? There was a rebuttal, so there were discussions, and the participation in discussions has also been rewarded. And the number of reviews, because some reviews in particular have helped us really when there was more work to do than we expected. So, we have 2 categories. There is the best reviewer and there's the best young reviewer category. And I would like to start with the best young reviewer category. There was a ranking and we chose 4 winners. So there is no specific order in the names that I'm going to mention, but I would like to ask them here one by one. The first best young reviewer is Brendan Clare.
Thank you.
The second one is Chiho Chan.
So for each of them, you have the certificate and 2 books.
The third one is Hee-Soon Choi. And number 4 of the best young reviewers is Walter Schreier, and I believe he's not here too, but we will take care of that he gets the review, that he gets the award. Then I would like to move on to the best reviewers. Number 1, Anil Jain.
So the senior ones get a bigger book.
Number 2, Kevin Boyer.
As you can tell, this is Kevin's proxy.
And the book is a bit smaller.
Thank you.
Number 3, also not here, but there must be a proxy as well, Richard Singh. And finally, and I know he's here, Patrizio Campisi. Congratulations. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, not only to those who received the award, but all the reviewers for their hard work in selecting the best papers for the conference. Now, the next award I'm going to announce is the ICB-2013 Poster Award. You know, this is an award actually selected by anonymous voting during the conference. So for this award, I would invite Dr. R.J. Kumar to introduce and present the award.
Thank you. For ICB 2013, we introduced Best Voted Poster Paper Awards, and all the participants of the conference were invited to vote anonymously. And just based on the counting, this award is granted. So this Best Poster Paper Award was for poster presentation on the each day of the conference, that is 5th, 6th, and 7th of June. So I'll read out the winners. So for the poster paper presentations on 5th of the June, the best voted poster is titled A High Quality Finger Vascular Pattern Dataset Collected Using a Custom Design Capturing Device by Brent Tom and Raymond Belhoris from the University of Twente. The second best voted poster award on June 6, 2013 goes to the paper titled Automatic Facial Makeup Detection with Application to Face Recognition, and the authors are Shinjun Chen, Anita Ancheva, and Anand Ross. And the last, that is today's Best Voted Poster Award. The award goes to the paper titled Variations of Handwritten Signatures with Time, a Sigma Normalized Analysis. And the authors are Marta Gomez Barrero, Javier Galbeli, Rajin Plamandan, and Julian Firaj, and also Javier Ortega Gracia.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, last but not least, we have the Best Doctoral Consortium Post Award. And to introduce and present the award, I will invite Brandon Clare.
Hey, thank you, everybody. As most people know, we had a doctoral consortium event here where we paired senior members of our community with doctoral students participating in the conference. So the goal was to help people interact, get some advice, and really just get to know a few more people. Part of this was a poster competition as well, so I think some people saw the different posters that we had. So we asked the mentors to vote on who they felt had the best poster in terms of impact of research, quality of presentation, and then also just general body of work throughout their PhD to this point. So based on the votes, the winner of this is Milovanovic, and I don't believe that he's here, but round of applause for Milos anyways. And I don't believe there's a proxy for him in here as well. So.
Thank you. Well, this is the awards that we have for this year's conference. Perhaps next time we can also set up a base station chair, so then I have stand a chance. Anyway, many of us here in this room have, involved in organizing conferences, so we know how much work organized company involves. Putting everything together, answering emails about hotel accommodation, registration, etc. And I'm sure you all agree with me. This conference has been wonderfully organized, and a wonderful banquet, and a wonderful lecture hall. Everything goes very smoothly. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite you to join me to give the local organizer, Professor Javier Ortega Gracia and his team, a big round of applause. Of ICB-2013 is a heavyweight work. So, last but not least, I would invite Javi to say a few words to close the conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Well, I would like to close, but before just closing and thanking the people who has really helped to this conference to be a success, I would like to focus on the forthcoming biometrics conferences, the main ones. First of them is the International Joint Conference on Biometrics together with BITAS in 2014, and I think Ajay Kumar is going to make a short presentation about it. He will be co-chairing it, so please, Ajay. Yeah.
So thanks, Javier. Looking forward, the next year, that is ICB 2014, is jointly organized with BTS 2014. So this is a special arrangement between IAPR TC4 and IEEE Biometrics Council. And we have gone to the due process of soliciting proposals and reviewing by both joint committee between the TC4, IAPR TC4, and also Biometrics Council. So IGCB 2014 will be held in Clearwater Bay, Tampa, and the website is already available. If you Google IGCB 2014, you're already there, although it's under heavy construction and reconstruction. And on the first day, that's September 29, we are going to have tutorials. And regarding the industry track, we are trying to bring synergy with BCC, which is held every year in same location, that's Tampa. So this is a little gray area because we have not yet been able to finalize regarding the industry track. So either there will be an industry track separate with IGCB 2014, or we will have a synergy with BCC so that the participants can arrange can visit both of these venues. Organizing committee, Joseph Kittler, Sudeep Sarkar, and myself will be the chair, so I will not be going on each of these names for the organizing committee, but I have it as a part of the proposal presentation that we gave earlier. And what you see here is the composition of the organizing committee. So it's a fairly balanced from USA, a large number, 16, the reason being we have participants from BTAS, BTAS Organizing Committee. Key dates, the paper submission deadline is April 10th, 2014, and there will be a rebuttal period and there will be the review or discussion, and the conference dates September 13 to October 2nd, 2014. And while selecting the dates, we especially took care of the holidays in Asia and also in the Europe, especially the Golden Week holiday in China. and there is no conflict between the submission deadlines for the nearby conferences. And regarding the venue, the conference venue hotel is Sheraton Sankey Resort in Clearwater Bay, and it's a beautiful scenic resort. Would love to be there.
Is that you?
It's definitely not to me, but to someone else, and this is part of the face recognition challenge posed for IGCB 2014. And this is just a sample that gives you an idea about the challenges for the next conference. So this is the conference venue for the presentation, and some more pictures. You can find a lot more if you land on igcb2014.org. So this is the reason why it's known as Clearwater Bay. You can see water is so clear. Some of the features, we have industry track, best reviewers award we introduced from ICB 2013. One of the specialities, we have separate award committee chairs for IGCB 2014. Acceptance rate down. So going by the cues for IGCB 2011, we had 324 submissions, and acceptance rate was about 30%. And this was largely due to the large submission we have. And we expect for IGCB 2014, the acceptance rate would be similar. So we target that submission would be over 400, and that's primarily the reason that we have 4 program chairs for this conference. And that's it. Looking forward to see you next year in Clearwater Bay.
Thank you very much. And yesterday during the banquet, it was announced also the place where we will do the International Conference on Biometrics in 2015, because we are moving from Europe, then to America, then to Asia. And I will ask Professor Butipong Arekul from Thailand to make the presentation of ICB 2015.
Okay, on behalf of our committee and TC4 committees, as I will be pleasure to present the 2015 ICB in Phuket in Thailand. Okay, so these are the chair that we they already commit that they're going to do the works. So you can see the names and you remember it. Okay, one good warning that right after the IJCB 14, right? Then the paper submission is in November 15. So probably you have to prepare for the whole 2 conference at the same time, because the time of the conference date is May 20 to 22nd. So, but anyway, it's up to the program chair that probably delay the time or anything, but we have to discuss it because you still have time. Okay, about Phuket. Phuket is the biggest island in Thailand, and I think most of you know that's a good destination for the tourists. For me, it's no longer Thailand anymore, because most of the majority in some places are foreigners. As the last time that I was working on the SC37s meeting. Then, okay. Actually, there's a lot of activity over there. Okay. And yeah, you can see that there. So you can go scuba diving or anything, and trekking, canoeing, or elephant riding. And this is the first tentative meeting venues. We call this is a 5-star hotel, and their capacity to cover you maybe at least 200 to 300 litigate. They have their own private beach, and actually it's close to the Patong beach, very famous one. And they have a free shuttle bus go, and then they are really private, and then you can have both technical conference as well as your pleasure to enjoy the nature, sea, sand, and sun. Okay, this is a second tentative. So this one is located actually in the Patong beach. That's why I said that there probably some of you not like crowded people or anything. So if I got the first one, that would be good. Okay, so Phuket is okay. There are most flights to connect to the Bangkok first, right? And then the Phuket is down south about 800 kilometers. So it's just about 1 hour. It's just about 1 hour flight from Bangkok to Phuket. There are about at least 20 domestic flights, including low-cost airline, at least 20. So you have plenty of plane to catch each day to go to the Phuket. So no problem with the traveling. And then the Bangkok is a center of most of the flights to go to. Okay. One problem is from the airport to the Patong. You can see that the logo of airplane over there, and then it takes about 40 kilometers, and it's about maybe 1 hour or 40-minute drive, something like that. And somehow, someday, there are traffic. So be prepared if you have to catch the plane or anything. Okay, that's all. I think I welcome you to Thailand, Phuket, and then I'll see you there. So,
thank you very much. So we are really at the end of the conference, very end of the conference. One announcement, we will post videos of the session, but if you do have a good selection of photos, pictures, please send also those photos, those pictures to us, and we will post them to have a complete idea, complete picture of the conference. And that's all. Let me again thank all of you, because not only for coming here, but because the technical level of the conference was really excellent. And we will remind the conference not only for the technical issues, because we have been here and we will have in mind all the things that we've lived, but the conference itself will be remembered because of the technical issues and because of the papers and that will be cited in the future. So that's the meat of the conference. We just put some organizational salt on that, and of course a little bit of social event pepper, so that the cook could be of first quality. So thank you, and we are really grateful, all the local guys, for being here. Thanks again, and see you next year in Tampa, Florida. Thank you. There is a final announcement. There is going to be held here the Coast IC-1106 working groups meeting going on for those people who are inside the coast. Thank you.